Well, the reason I see processes as being, I guess, problematic is that it's easy to set it up, but very difficult for them to be followed through.
I'll be starting this episode by giving you a very good example and a good story done by Abraham Zeleznik. He was a professor emeritus at Harvard and did a lot of interesting conversations around careers and psychology. So, what Mr. Zeleznik did is he went to a bunch of participants, which involved design managers, design leaders, and he gave them a picture of a boy holding a violin. He then asked them to write a fictitious short story based on that picture. And he had a lot of interesting insights. A lot of managers were talking about people and other groups of people. For example, the boy was wanting to play football or he was part of a choir, and the story revolved around that. But when he looked at the answers from leaders, it was more about the boy's feelings, the boy's intentions, etc. So he essentially concluded that the distinction is simply that a manager's attention is more on how to get things done. While when it comes to leaders, it's about how the events and decisions affect the participants. Um, Leading up to the first question, which is around your opinions on design management versus design leadership. And this entire experiment was done about 2 3 decades ago, and when you look at design, it's fairly a new field. It's still probably been maybe a decade plus hardcore UX UI. That still is very very short as compared to engineering, sales, etc. So hierarchies are usually pretty flat. Like some of the biggest organizations today don't have as big teams as people perceive sometimes. When it comes to design management and design leadership, what's your take?
So the way I look at it, right, for me, design management has become like a level in the career ladders that most orgs have out there, right? I'm not even sure if a design manager today is actually a design manager in many of those orgs, right? It may just be the default place for a individual to move to in that org, because that's the space for that the org has for the growth of that particular individual. For example, once you finish working as an IC and the org doesn't need any senior ICs, there may only be an opening for a design manager in that org. And naturally, people are forced to take that. And to be honest, there are very few orgs out there which actually need that level of individual contributions from a designer beyond a particular level. And so naturally, a lot of people become design managers just because the org supports them to become design managers. That's very different from what a design leader could be, right? The way you define design leader is interesting, because by definition, who you've talked about are people usually VP and above at an org, right? Those are the people that you associate as a design leader. In such orgs, that you need to understand is that you rarely get promoted to these positions. These are positions you're appointed at because people evaluate you for those particular qualities that you have, so that you are able to lobby for design, look at the larger picture, and motivate all the designers in that team to actually drive towards the outcome. That's at a very high level. People say maybe 10,000 feet type of view on the design problem at an org. That's interesting because that's not only what is expected. A lot of times, a design leader is the design executive. They are in some ways in service of the org rather than the designers that they are representing. I feel that there has to be that component wherein the design leader is also trying to push the org in favor of designers, and that's harder to do. It's not as easy as just like posting on Twitter. It's very very hard, right? Because design in this industry is fairly new, and they haven't had the skills or the time to learn how to influence the other stakeholders on the table. Our field as design managers and design leaders is fairly new, and like most of us don't know what we are doing because of that. So that was a tiny perspective based on what you told me and how I saw it.
Right. I was having a chat with Wolfram. He's actually opening the podcast for us, and we discussed how it's a lot like a servant leader. You're ensuring that your team members are smoothly functioning, and that tends to be a little bit tricky. We had done a session on going from an individual contributor to a design manager in Bangalore as one of our master classes. And we really spoke about how this is so new because in India specifically, right, it's been only about a decade where really first design driven companies have come out. You have crossed that decade threshold also in itself. A lot of it is taken by the ear. I think I'm at least going to conclude this answer knowing that your real fundamental job is to serve your team. That's a core function. And I love the fact that you mentioned that you're really appointed for these roles usually. So it's a matter of the organization maturing, and that's when the right time will come. I'm moving on to a very interesting stat I see directly on Jiva's landing page. 525 million farmers grow 70% of the world's food. Basically, less than 10% of the world grows 70% of the world's food, and they are amongst the poorest people on earth. India is also very agrarian. Half of the labor market represents agriculture related jobs. So, for many Indians and Indonesians, Singaporeans, the entire region, farmers are a symbol of a provider. They feed the nation. So Jiva enables microfinancing. It makes it easy for them to do their business, sell more easily. You're doing really important work at Jiva. And my next question was, Kenneth, what is your role as a senior design manager at Jiva? Love to know more.
Yeah, that's a good question. When I left Gojek, I had been promoted to a senior design manager, but the role there was slightly different from what I'm currently doing. Over here, we're still a very fairly early stage startup. We've been working with smaller teams, right, versus a larger team like how it was at Gojek. So here we've got three teams, which are like service design, design research, and product design. Product design is encompassing all different disciplines in product design. And I've been building that team in that particular manner. Because we're still fairly small, we don't really have dedicated brand folks or illustrators. We just have one UX writer, which is a big departure from the team I had at Gojek, where it was mostly service based. So if there was a research work, then the research team would own that. If there was UX writing, the UX writing team would own that. But over here, it's like the product design team is made out of these different individuals. So when there's a need to get some corporate brand design done so that like we can make our Instagram post look better, that still comes to the product design team. If there's some logo work to be done, that's coming to the product design team. If there's some copy that needs to be written for our marketing materials, that may come to us, right? So over here, it means that I now need to step into these new roles and try to give some guidance wherein like I have previously not had exposure to. It's creative direction for these disciplines as well as just the product design where I do have expertise in, because I've been doing product design for around 8 years. That's one major difference. Apart from this, what are the different responsibilities and things that come to a product designer at Jiva? There's also things that as a design manager you would need to worry about, which is the processes and the administrative work that needs to be done for like things to actually move smoothly for the team. Then there's also caring about or evaluating the growth of an individual in the design team, see what we can do to help them bridge that gap and go to the next level. It's still a small team, so almost every person we are interviewing has to go through like me. I guess non-scalable ways of hiring people, which is every person that we screen into the product design workflow, I am the first point of contact. They may have a tiny conversation with the HR, but I'm the person who is introducing them to Jiva as an org and explaining to them what it means to be here and like figuring out whether they are a good fit. I need to also build relationships with the different product design pods in Jiva, right? So we've got around 6 or 7 pods. That also means that I need to be building these relationships with tech leads, product managers, and other stakeholders in the org so that the team can function and move towards an output faster.
Got it. A bunch of roles there, right? It's a very holistic role. creative direction of everything: design, training, hiring, performance mapping, and even setting the whole design ops processes. Product which is evolving and growing so rapidly has a very ad hoc like setup in the start, where everything design, everything creative is routed the central product team. What is the threshold where you start diverging? Do we have a separate brand design team, a separate marketing team, so your
Oh,
product internally don't get burdened with all work?
yeah. Actually, the short answer is like when you feel that there's enough work to hire someone to do it full time, that's really the place when a team starts getting these type of specializations being formed within the org. Because in the end, you need to justify your headcount in your projections. The second way is some of these disciplines, I think, need to be there right from the start. That's non-negotiable. Brand is something that you can still compromise and wait for a bit, work with what you have and push it a little bit further. But teams like design research, for example, are things that you need to have in the beginning itself as a separate design discipline, because that helps you move faster and understand your users in a better way. That means that you're building better products, and maybe there's a chance that you'll reach that product market fit faster, because product designers are usually very busy with what's there to be built. When I was a young product designer, I could barely get to talk to any of my users. It would take an immense amount of time for me to actually find people, schedule something with them, and actually go and meet them and conduct an interview with them. In the first gig that I had, I probably might have talked to 5 or 6 users in total, right? Like core users. Design research is definitely a discipline that you should definitely have a start with. Also, like where we are right now, we are a team predominantly working on the audience, which is primarily Indonesians. I can't write the copy for them because it's in a different language, Bahasa Indonesia, right? So for us, it's very important to have someone on the team who can standardize the copy in our products so that they're actually making sense to our end users, right? These are non-negotiable disciplines that you would need to start with in the beginning, versus like maybe specialties like illustration or branding, which you can still delay their entry into the team because you can just get like freelancers or agencies to help with that.
Absolutely. Brilliant advice. I've seen a lot of people do the opposite. Being a marketplace of freelancers, we've seen that when you're creating like a platform led solution or a product led solution, you need research in house, you need UX folks in house. But when it comes to your ad hoc requirements, which, as you said, you don't need a full time role for, you could pass those on to freelancers. A lot of listeners today would be folks who are aspiring to be in your place sooner than later. So, what according to you are like some traits, maybe personality traits or skills which one should develop to become a good design manager?
So the generic answer is you need to be wanting to manage people. The people in your team should be someone that you are interested in working with. Part of it, of course, means that if you hire those people, there's a higher chance that you'll actually enjoy working with them versus if you get appointed to a role in the team of a design manager. Second thing is you need to manage your time because, like I said, there are these 5, 6 different responsibilities that a design manager has, and it's not really that easy to balance all of it. Same with like projects. When you're managing projects, you need
Right.
to have some basic project management skills, though a lot of it may be done at a pod level. If you're a product design manager, you may still have design specific initiatives which would need you to have some basic skills in how do you do project management, delegation, and some things like this. What is different now than when you were an individual contributor is that there are these new sections that open up in your roles and responsibility, which is and optics, right? And you're really not prepared for knowing what to do in these domains because you've been evaluated on how good you are as a designer till then. And then suddenly there is like an expectation that you need to be good at all these different skills. And they are not really natural for people to have, or, it's very, very normal for a young design manager to actually be bad at a lot of these things, right? Because no one's told them. Usually
Right.
their manager itself isn't really aware of how to get these things done. And they are themselves struggling, trying to do their best, trying to get the team forward, moving forward. For me, I think a similar thing happened, right? Like I inherited a team, and like again, like there was no proper understanding for me on like what is expected of my role. And of course, that was my problem, that I didn't go and resolve what it is expected of my goal.
Right.
But the team was really good, and there were some people in the team who I could work with. So it was like I wasn't the only design manager in the team, and that was a good thing, because I had someone else in the team who I could work with to institute processes, someone else to take some ownership on the initiatives that we wanted to drive. So that helped me a bit, but not everyone may be that lucky to get someone who you could work with closely. For those folks, they'll get a lot of things on their plate at one go. And I guess the best thing that they can do for themselves is to realize that it's okay to not be able to do all of these things. In most teams, you also need to own the product design quality of the team, as well as mentor people, manage their growth, and licenses and planning events. And it's just a lot of different skills that you need to have.
Right.
Eventually, beyond this as well, you will see this pattern in people, that they are good at some things and not at all of them, because it's hard to be good at all of them. They would need to understand what they are not good at and see if there's someone in the team that they can delegate to, or they would need to hire someone to have those skills, so that they would take some of the workload off from the design manager. It becomes like this reflective practice that a design manager would need to follow, so that they are able to do justice to their role while not burning out.
Got it. I think you said some brilliant things. I love that statement you said, where what happens is you do good work as a designer and you raise the ranks and then you become a manager. Often, I'm not saying that's the only path. So you've really been tested for your execution and your design skills, and they're put into a place to manage people, which is a whole different ballgame. So I love that. That's why it's completely okay for you to fail and then learn the whole design process. Any which ways is that. Another important part was you don't need to be the person who knows everything. You are a manager to understand cavities and then hire people who are complementing the team and are increasing the overall combined intelligence of your team. So I think that was also brilliant. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, sometimes it's said that design managers are folks who are good with people skills and emotional intelligence. And these things can be hard to detect even for a individual. Did you have a moment where you realized that, oh, I think I can manage people well? And if so, what was that moment? Maybe it'll help the listeners.
Yeah, I did have a moment where I felt that, okay, I feel that I would really be a good fit for this role. But I don't think it was when I was managing people. It was, I
Okay.
think, when I was navigating bureaucracy, because that's again a skill that doesn't come normally to designers, and it's not so easy to pick up either. Navigating bureaucracy is hard, especially if you're in a fairly large org with its own policies and things.
Right.
And actually, there were like a couple of instances early 2020 when the org was actually implementing a policy. And during that particular instance, I was able to figure out, basically think on my feet and see how I can help my team get better results from that process. But it meant that you'd have to do an insane amount of follow up and a lot of documentation. Realizing that I can do that and figure out, hey, this is what needs to be done, was one of the reasons I felt that, okay, now this is interesting. I want to see how this is going to go ahead, experimenting around navigating this system, right? And figuring out how you can, to some extent, game it.
Yeah. I think this is great because it's awesome that you realize this while not really doing design managerial things. Like Naval Ravikant talks about the specialized knowledge you have. You form this when you're growing. And it could be anything. Like in your case, it was navigating through a complex structure and having it in you to follow up and get things done. It has a lot to do with a lot of traits a good design manager has.
At the same time, some of the things that I've also been like having the privilege in my career is that I was in a place where I didn't have to be scared of like actually doing things. Like my managers were always good that I can do things. I have some space to work with, and they are always supportive on that front. That really makes a difference, I think. in the end, right? Maybe I would not have felt that I had the right to actually figure out the system and try to use it for my benefit if I didn't see my manager trying to also do something similar. That role model needs to exist.
Fair. Yeah, I think surround yourself with great managers, and it's a matter of time for you to learn the trick of the trades. That's also some sound advice. Next up, I wanted to ask you about the limits. Another follow up question I'll ask you is about, is it hands on? Is it just pure management where you're completely away from creative execution?
Yeah, so there is a limit. A lot of people have studied it as well. To be effectively managing like X number of people in a team, I think that number is around 6 or 7, right? Beyond which it's impossible to be efficiently managing that team and its output. That's fairly true. I've seen not only me, but like other peers also struggle when their team goes beyond a particular level. That definitely is a limit. What is the second half of your question?
About hands on versus it being managerial. Are you actually executing and creating it when it comes down to the screens, the UX, the interviews, or are you managing the entire flow?
What happens is that ideally you should not be working hands on, and most of us have learned that the hard way. The growth that you need to have when moving from an IC to a more lead or manager role itself in the team is that you need to stop worrying about the quality of the output as much. Start being okay with certain things being done in a different way than how you would have done it, because if you are not, then you will just stress about why is the output of this designer isn't the way you would have done it. You need to understand that they are two different designers and you would have two different ways of doing a particular task. That's not that easy either to for you to realize. For me personally, I got to experience it quite early. When I was not even a senior product designer, I had to work with an intern and give them a task to get something done, right? What I got back from that was very different from what I would have driven that outcome to. And at that point of time, I was not okay with it. Gradually over the like 5-6 years where I've started to care less about how the output is finally, and I expect the designers in my team to own that decision making, at least at an interface level. I don't really care how the interface is going to look like as long as they own it, and I hope that they learn from that release rather than me coming and justifying how it should be this way or the other way. There is of course an exception to this rule. Not everyone is the same type of designer again, right? Sometimes you may need to get in and explain what needs to be done for the particular project, and usually these are during projects which are at crunch time, so that your involvement in that at a hands-on level may actually be very beneficial for it to get completed. But even then, what I do now is just go and make a rough Frankenstein type of wireframe to communicate what may need to be done, and then I just let the designer own the rest of it. Designers need to own the rest of it, otherwise it would just be like me directing something and then coming back and micromanaging them, which I try to not want to be doing. And I've also seen myself fail badly when I try to own a pod. Given all my other responsibilities, it's not possible for me to budget enough time to work on execution level tasks, and adding that on myself would only mean delays in design. But the limit with when it comes to that is that we need to have a team which has enough bandwidth to pick up that task. So sometimes the design managers tend to have some hands-on project that they need to initiate and hopefully are able to have enough time to drive it to some conclusion. It's easier when this project is a global type of project rather than a sprint-based type of project. But there is some amount of hands-on work that is expected, at least in the current role. Ideally, there should be one level of hierarchy that's reporting to a design manager who can own those things, decisions. And so the design manager can have a very minimal involvement in that product's design decisions, but the senior most designers in those pods take that ownership and can do all the responsibilities that a design manager takes usually on those pods. There's a long list of tasks when it comes to managing people, designing growth plans for those individuals. I think that's incredibly hard, and again a skill that none of us are really prepared for. I think in 2021 and 2020 we tried doing this and it all failed badly because we didn't have the time for that. That's a whole different ballgame. Trying to structure learning plans, right? You have now gone through all those learning sessions to know how to structure a plan and see what the person is doing. What I've noticed is that maybe it's easier when a person is a beginner designer and they have to go to the next level. So all you
Yeah,
need to do is like tell them how to learn certain tools or like certain entry level skills, but it gets
right,
harder the higher up the
correct.
designer is at, and it just becomes ridiculously impossible for you to do that task.
Absolutely. You have a very nice newsletter which highlights that, and I'll actually bring that up a little bit later on the whole careers bit. I have consistently heard this for the manager who's been a great operator to finally let go is very tough because you hold a very high bar for yourself, leave alone others. And you need now to look at how is my team able to deliver with the highest standard and technically without you being involved, right? That's where you want to reach as a manager, even as a founder. The idea is, can the team operate without your involvement? That's so much tougher because it needs patience, you need training, you need to let them fail and you have to fail with them. So it's a hard one, but I think you've covered it very beautifully and gave your own personal examples.
Yeah, I
I
agree what you said actually. Yeah, you have to be comfortable with them failing as well to some extent. A lot of these lessons you learn the hard way itself.
I mean, there is no easy way, right? I think the conclusion here is that you will struggle. The struggle is a part of the process. Actually, going to bring back Abram Zeleznik's experiment once again before I ask you the next question. So, one of the things he mentions in that article is about how he feels a lot of operators and managers embrace process, seek stability, they seek control, and they instinctively are hired to resolve problems quickly. And he's realized that often that happens before someone's even understood the significance of that problem. But in contrast, when it comes to folks who eventually become leaders, they actually tolerate chaos, they tolerate lack of structure, and they're willing to let things go. And he compares these folks like to artists who are constantly wanting to iterate, fail, iterate, ask, etc. I'm bringing this thing up because when we were deciding on the episode, the P word, the process word came in. And you were like, hey, I don't want to get into talking a lot about that. So, what's your take here, Kenneth? How important are processes and how often should we break them?
Well, the reason I see processes as being problematic is that it's easy to set it up, but very difficult for them to be followed through. Like following through it, so needs someone to actually just focus on it, and that's a lot to expect. So recently, I've been also thinking about this situation wherein we today we are influenced by a lot of companies out there which seem to be functioning in some sort of ideal way, and others try to just adopt those processes and without figuring out what goes into pushing those processes at those ideal companies. In really large companies, they have enough resources to run things, like they have like design program managers, for example, whose job is basically to keep things and process running. But like in much smaller companies who don't have the luxury to get someone, they either have to delegate someone in the team to own the process, or that process is not going to last long. It may be there for a few meetings, and then without that ownership either from the individuals or by someone in the team, that process is just going to become like just an addition to the graveyard of processes that the team is using. So there's that constant persistence that needs to be there in a team for a process to continue. It's meaning that the team gets from it that helps in creating like a long lasting process which doesn't feel like another checklist item.
Interesting. Interesting. I think that's where sometimes the whole design ops function is debated. Folks say that, yeah, sometimes you want to take it by the ear. And I like the whole meaning take actually. Have you personally seen processes help in areas, or are there areas where you think you definitely need processes?
That's a big question to answer. I don't know if I'll be able to answer it well, but the answer is yes. A lot of processes can solve issues that the team is having or the org is having, right? But like I said, they are really hard. For example, just as simple as building a system wherein like people take notes during a meeting and then share it with all the attendees itself is non-scalable unless you have to figure out like who's assigned as a note taker, and the host can't be the note taker because the host may be driving the event, and it just
Right.
becomes complex after that. Even for like simple things like design critiques, this has been a barrier. Right now
Right.
the solution that we are experimenting with is recording the design critiques. That way there's no note taker. I don't need to worry about a round robin way of assigning a note taker. Thankfully we are at a state where we can keep video recorded, and then someone can go back to review
Right.
what different people said and take the notes themselves to improve. That's the continuous improvement that you will have to do in the different processes to make them effective. There are these things that have some limit of automation that you can do. I've also seen it work brilliantly wherein if you're working with different teams which work in a services model, then having a process of applying to them and getting their buy-in into the timeline helps, because that way you're not leaving things to chance or expecting them to be ready at the last minute, because you need to understand that they have a funnel which is from different, they need to all the different inputs and then make it into their roadmap so that they know what's coming when, so that
Right.
they better balance their time. It feels
Right.
like a process that's kept in place, and then people are forced to build additional processes to fuel that particular process to make it happen and reach a conclusion every 6 months.
Right. Right.
And sometimes these processes are maybe broken that you're taking like 3 months just to finish them. Then you get 3 months break and then 3 months again. That's not really productive. And I've also seen OKRs, for example. I've never seen them work because 3 months to just figure out what are the KRs. No one is on agreement. They have to get alignment. And like in 3 months, it just takes too long to decide what you need to build. But while in parallel, the team is already building something. It's only like these OKRs which are not defined, but the team is building something because the individual owners know what they need to build. They just haven't convinced the senior execs this is what the KR should be defined as. Those are two instances I've seen. I'm not convinced that these are the right ways of doing these things.
Got it. Got it. I want to jump now to knowing more about the Jiva team. I actually had two separate questions and I'm going to merge them for the sake of time. From at least what I understand, there is like a product design, service design, research team. You have India, Indonesia, Singapore as customer base. You've got teams in India and outside, and it's quite a setup, right? It's like cross borders and multiple ICPs. How do all these teams gel? If you can give us a breakdown of sorts as to how it works at Jiva.
Got it. Yeah. So for me, it wasn't that much of a drastic change because I already worked at Gojek, which was again in these three countries. So I think for me, it was quite a smooth transition moving between Gojek to Jiva. The main new thing that I found interesting was the discipline of service design. And my first call with Nav also was about what exactly service design and how does it fit into the org, right? I've never seen a technology org having service design built to their team, right? So I wanted to work with the rest of the org. And that's partly one of the things I'm very interested being at Jiva and observing.
Got it. I read a very nice blurb on human technology hybrid model. I think that's where service design must be playing an important part.
Yes, that's true. The human technology hybrid definition is something that most companies out there, which are services companies, already have, but there's less emphasis on the human in those systems, unfortunately.
Right.
So that's the small, tiny thing that service design as its own discipline is trying to do differently at Jiva. We've got 4 service designers now, and they're working on different type of problems like training, how they can improve the output that we are wanting to achieve. Like how do we train our agents to use the app better? How do we onboard them? And how do they understand the way our app works? What we can do to improve their performance in our system. And this isn't very different from like a food delivery company or a ride hailing company. Even there are individuals who are using apps to do their day-to-day tasks. They need the products that they use to be efficient enough so that they know what they're doing and how they can improve in their day-to-day job. The only difference is that now there's also a designer who's involved in this system. Usually there are people making these decisions, but rarely is there a trained designer
Yeah. But how do you manage? I think for someone who may be looking to, let's say, join a global team as a manager, how do you really go about meetings, workflows, etc.?
Got it. Yeah, I might have digressed a bit into service design and how it functions within the org, but let's keep this answer specific to maybe product design, and then that'll be easier to answer. My previous manager, Abhineet, had mentioned that it's the way to make this work is actually to make people meet each other. Like in India, we are almost 100% remote, right? That's the expectation the org has. But a fair amount of us are still in Bangalore. Maybe 30% of the India team may be in Bangalore. Our learnings have been that you would need to meet these people in real life. So we've been doing regular meetings in different locations, either in India, Indonesia, or Singapore, so that people get to know each other. Otherwise, you're just onboarding a lot of people. That sort of human connection can't be replaced by processes which are like asynchronously. Now at Jiva, we have moved one step further, which is that in India, we are almost 100% remote. And that means that this meeting and working together is definitely something that we have to think about consciously. Things like regularly setting up meetups either at a team level or at a guild level. November was quite a busy month for us. We got like as many people as we could who were working in India to come down and work from Bangalore for a month. So we're working out of this co-working space in Kormangla for the entire month. You are free to come for the whole 30 days or whatever suits you based on your personal preferences. We flew people not only from India, we also got people from Indonesia, Singapore to come down. They were sharing sessions, team lunches, dinners that kept happening. Pods got to meet, pods did some workshops, trying to figure out how their roadmap is and things like that. That still happens. We still need to plan for such events. We also, in the same time, did a design offsite. We flew everyone of the design team to go and we spent 5 days, 2 of which we spent from 9 to 6 on this design charter workshop. And we're still trying to do it so that the team themselves knows what their charter is and how they need to behave and what are the values that the design team is. These are like a co-creation workshop that we ran. So we've been doing these constantly through the year. This is the most recent one, but we've done at least 3-4 of them through the year at different sizes, of course. The second thing is we also need to know who the people we are designing for or building for. It's not only for designers, but also for product managers and engineers to know who they are building for. And that's not easy for you to do when you're sitting in your own houses, right? You're used to a certain way of living, and there are a lot of biases that creep in because of that. And we try to prevent that from happening by getting people to go on the field as well, which wasn't very easy earlier than like June this year. Until then, our presence on the ground was very limited. We had a few of our team members in Indonesia itself who were traveling domestically to go and talk to our target audience. But beyond that, we weren't able to get people in India or Singapore to go on the ground and meet the people who are using our products. We've been able to run studies as well as interact with people in their own environments. That's been definitely insightful. For example, these are new regions for me. Like I've never been to these regions. In August, I got a chance to go through the province of East Java, and we had selected like a couple of core areas to go and see, meet people, and or go to an onboarding program to see how people are reacting to our products. For me, it was like one of those moments where you saw people struggle with your product and you were able to identify, document, and add it onto the backlog of these teams to go and fix. And we did fix those issues. And there's no replacement for something like that in products which are built with these type of users in place. A lot of this working is also now dependent on being asynchronous and relying on certain processes. Some of the stuff we've anyway adopted, which is common in many companies like sprint planning, design processes like design critiques. These things help keep people on the same page so that they know what's happening in the different product pods and how those individual designers are taking these decisions. Even before I joined, Nav, the head of design at Jiva, has been keeping process in place. So I'm not taking credit for any of those things. That helps. That environment of having these spaces for people to just hang around online, even without meeting each other, was always there. We have a couple of unique sessions. One is we do something called as a world tour session, wherein any individual can come and present something that interests them. It could be an old project of theirs or explaining graffiti to the general public. We've even been getting guests from the industry or academics to come and give lectures on their work. We've recently started this thing called as Product Design Bi-weekly, where we're trying to share our knowledge with the rest of the team. We use all of these opportunities to bridge the learning gaps that may be there in the team. It's not very structured, it's volunteer driven right now, but it's also a core way of making people meet outside their work within the team itself.
Got it. Got it. I think a bunch of things to unpack here and good insights. First up, camaraderie is difficult to form when you are completely remote. So meeting people and doing these offline offsites is really helpful. Then you mentioned about just general sessions to hang out also. And generally all other kinds of things like asynchronous working tend to help you manage everything. I want to talk about working out of India and building for a profile or an ICP you don't know much about. I think we're all very bullish on the India out model, build in India and ship to the world. A lot of people are doing that, especially in SaaS. So what's been your general advice? I hear one thing, which is you had a local team do more research, but as a design manager, have you picked up on some things on how to hire effectively locally, or if you can't do that because of budget constraints, what are some hacks around it?
Yeah, so when it comes to this, since our current target audience is Indonesia and being in India, I don't understand the language. So it's becomes inevitable that we hire folks who know the language. Could be researchers or it could be even product designers. If we in the end hire more product designers in Indonesia, that means that there is a possibility that they can take over some of the research work as well and not have all the workload only on the researchers. So if we want to strategize that way to balance the team, then that's the way we'll be looking to right now focus on building our team. The product design team, the majority of them are still in Indonesia, and the way we plan to scale the team is also in Indonesia right now. And of course, design research, it becomes inevitable that they are in Indonesia right now. But at the same time, things like service design, it's still a very new field. You will not be able to find people in Indonesia who fit that profile. So our service design team is heavily based in India or Singapore. That's where our expertise is. But we are able to run that with support from the local teams, not just design research and product design, but also the other teams like training and operations and customer support. These all help those service designers become closer to the users. They didn't answer your question.
I think the core is really to hire locally is what I'm understanding. So how do you really go about that when it comes to hiring locally? Do you have a local HR who takes care of that, or how do you kind of blend that?
Okay, so as far as I know, I think every country has its own HR organization who's responsible for the policies, and the policies change, of course. So yes, they are there to help us through it, but at the same time, like the HR org also needs to cater to that country's headcount target, which is not only design and beyond it. Now, I think the unique challenge is that within the PDG team, design has been the first team to actually focus on hiring in Indonesia. So this is like product design and engineering. Among these sections, we've been the first. So we've been trying to figure out these workflows you can. So there is some challenges to it, which I didn't need to encounter at Gojek. I'm also new to this. And very simple thing is that we are new. No one knows about us or what we do in this space. So it becomes slightly harder to attract talent or find talent. There are people out there, but you don't have a good enough pipeline that you can set or like a presence that will attract people, right? So we have been trying to figure out different channels, which channel works best. Are there WhatsApp groups that we can be part of or local communities that we can circulate our job openings in? We've been even experimenting with LinkedIn job posts with like images and try to see if that works. We've been like trying a lot of different things to see what would work for a company like us. Our interview process is very lean. To some extent, we may joke that it's more of a culture fit than a skills evaluation process. It's very, very simple. You get a screening call with me. Then if you go through that, then you go to like a portfolio discussion where you showcase a couple of projects. You also get a call with Nav before we go to the HR round. Or if you're a senior designer, then you also end up getting a stakeholder on. Like, that's pretty much it. We don't give assignments or anything. We want to see how far it goes. Will it scale, or will there be issues with it? At least I think for 2023, I don't foresee us making much changes to this, because we may not drastically grow the team. That means that we may not need to really modify these people. But I think at the same time, we will move towards a more structured evaluation of the people. That was which was missing. So finding people is fairly tough. If you want a little bit of brand work or illustration work to get done, the process of who do you reach out to, what would be the way to reach out to, managing all the people that get back to you is not a simple task.
I think what I'm at least understanding here is that if you're dealing with multiple personas outside your core city or your core expertise from an exposure point of view, hiring locally, getting the right HRs is the right way to go. Maybe a little bit more cumbersome, but if you want to do the right thing, I think you'll need that effort.
And I'm not sure how aware you are of this situation, but Indonesia has some really talented designers, especially when it comes to visual design and illustration.
Yeah, 100%.
I've always been blown away by the work that they put out regularly.
In terms of creative output, that region actually is a big contributor in the world's share of generally the number of deliverables created every day. I'm definitely aware of that. Now, Kenneth, we spoke a lot about Jiva. I'd love to take a few steps back. Before Jiva, you were at Gojek. We dropped that name a bunch of times. And before that, you were at Practo. And in each organization, you've been there for a pretty significant amount of time. I've seen a lot of releases and learned from them. I was very curious because you were literally going 0 to 1 in, I think, Practo, individual contributor, then manager. Also, Practo was a flat organization. Then Gojek was pretty big, also transitioned and evolved in that time period quite a lot. A lot of M&As were involved. Right now, it's something which is more multidisciplinary, more innovation-led. I don't know about the difference in size, but it's definitely a bump in terms of responsibilities. So how has your day evolved over the last few years? Because there's been significant shifts in what you've been up to.
Yeah. So when I started off, right, I joined as an intern at Practo. I started working on the Practo Ray product, which was their clinic management tool, which still exists in some form, but I don't think there's any active development that's happening on it. And that was also part of my master's thesis. At that time, I was just a fresh grad from design school, and the way I expected a designer to function in the team was very different from how it may be in the industry. Thankfully, I was in a team where like there were people there to support me, and that was a conscious decision on my part to actually join that team. And I was lucky enough to get to. This is the first experience of me working with product managers or even developers, right? And I'm saying this after like me being a front-end developer. Before I did my master's, I was working as a front-end JavaScript developer. But there, it was very different. As an engineering org, we were completely isolated. You would just get like a doc with certain screenshots and what it needs to look like, and that's all you needed to do. But in modern product orgs, what was expected is you collaboratively as a team build what's necessary. So that was definitely something which took some learning to get to, right? Being able to know how to collaborate with the different people in that team, right? Understanding what their roles and responsibilities were. Most of the early work I did, we didn't have enough bandwidth in the team to actually be dedicated to a particular product. But over the 1 year when you started really building the team, then it was possible for me to own a complete product. So it was always collaborating with that team and figure out what needs to be built, how it needs to be built, and like on your day-to-day execution processes. There was some experience owning a particular platform or product and the guidelines within it. This was like pre-design system hype days. No one really had design system. We all had like style guides maybe, and that is what we worked with. So we had to define it for our products, and we had all different ones. Like we never ended up standardizing them, and it was not possible. And I understand to some extent why it's not possible. But at the same time, I think somewhere over there, we still had some concept of design tokens in place, though it was not explicitly talked about. So the craft emphasis was a lot more. The collab emphasis was a lot more as you gradually increase in years of experience. So when I moved to Gojek, initially I was still working in an IC for at least a year or more than that actually, because that was what was needed. The team was structured in still a flat way where everyone reported to Abhineet and like everyone was working on an individual contributor. But again, dedicated to a product, you work with the product managers on that and the tech leads and try to get the product out there. And my transition to a design manager happened a year after I joined because there was a need for a new team which was being formed and they needed someone to go and lead that team. Then I had to understand where I sit in the hierarchy of things. That took me a while to get used to. And there I might have done some mistakes on it. I did not know that I had to build these relationships with the different senior stakeholders. And I was still operating in a way like collaborating with designers and maybe even at the pod level, but not talking to the head of product for that team or the head of engineering more regularly. That could have been done better. Over there, because the team grew, the team was initially a GoResto team, and then the new team called Merchants got created, and inside that were like people from Gojek, people from Midtrans, people from Nadipos. So basically, these teams all formed together into one new org, and I fit into that org somehow.
Nice.
Right? And that worked for my benefit. That org kinda had a different DNA than the rest of the team. I felt like at home in that place. That made getting things done a little more easier. And that org itself did some extra curricular initiatives like immersion programs, research AMAs and stuff like that. So that was a fun place to be in. But I had to do a lot more relationship building and work on the growth plans of an individual, build certain processes in place. Before Gojek had a design ops team, dedicated team, a lot of us in our own design teams had to build their own processes. There was no standardization, but we built what felt worked for our own teams. So your experience as a designer inside Gojek would be different based on which team you're in or who's your manager. And that's something people don't realize maybe when they're applying to companies, that this is actually true across not only in Gojek, most companies. People may think that this is a great place to work, but if the team you're in isn't, then you will not like working at that place. And that's quite common. These are things that we built in place. And then when we got the design ops team, they started trying to see how we can standardize this across and call it one process that unites us all, and also building processes that make people interact across teams, because that also becomes hard when you grow into a fairly large team. It's easy to build that camaraderie within a team, but like moving it outside becomes harder. One of the things we realized, like I said, I was still owning design as an individual contributor in some small teams, mainly because there was no other designer who I could assign to it. And that team had very infrequent workload that would come in. So I can't assign someone dedicated, nor would anyone have the time to pick that up. So when I used to still pick up stuff on the side, but that's when I realized that I can't. It's not possible for me to do that task because I would end up like missing it and something else would get compromised. It would also happen like I may miss out certain use cases completely because I don't have the time to think this through. Most of my time would go into just like the discovery and the research aspect of things. And when I had to come to the execution part, I would not probably have enough time to give it because there were so many other things that would need my attention. I felt that I shouldn't be doing both these jobs. A few other design managers at that point would have realized that there is a need to have a separate owner for day-to-day execution level tasks, while the manager is more involved with the other aspects of the team. That's one thing I've learned over there. I think that's how it should be in fairly established teams. When a team is fairly stable, I think that's something that the team should be aiming for. When I moved to Jiva, the main reason I moved, and also the main reason I started the newsletter, is to understand a little bit on that aspect of managing the team. At least I did not feel that I had the flexibility or the freedom to initiate certain of these processes, at least at Gojek, right? Because the team was already in place. There were a lot of processes in place. The org is fairly mature, so it has its own way of doing things. There was less scope to maybe try out certain things, right? Modifying the hiring process, for example. There was a team which was in charge of doing that. And even though you are involved in all of it, changing things at a certain point wasn't that easy. One of the things that I wanted to do at Jiva was to actually figure out how do you hire a team and test out different processes and things that I've learned over the years and see and try to experiment with them and see what works, what doesn't work. One of the main reasons I decided to be part of this team. At the same time, when I joined this team, I also realized that at that point of time, there was really no product design team here. Right? We had been building with whatever we had and whoever we had. I just was a senior design manager. I was not a senior product design manager at any point of time. but there was a need for someone to step in and own that product design function. And I felt that at that point of time, I was the one who was most experienced in doing this, which was true because I've basically spent like 8-9 years just working in product orgs, being part of product design teams. And I decided to take that as the main initiative. So we had to first hire a team. We had to start thinking of a design system and execute it. That's how I fell into this role of product design manager at Jiva.
Got it.
So
I think what's really awesome is every job is like setting you up for success for the next job. From getting hands-on and working with the team for the first time in Practo to finally getting to a more organized team and then learning that you have to go beyond just execution and design, and then learning a lot of fundas on working with the team and processes, then finally creating your own and execute effectively. That's been quite an interesting journey, Kenneth. I think it's a very short time. 8 years sounds a lot, but I've seen career graphs is pretty quick.
it's not really over yet. There are new challenges that I need to learn over here. I hope I figure that out. For example, I was in a role wherein I needed to ask for permission to get something done. But I'm finding a role where I need to not do that and maybe ask for forgiveness or like actually give that direction to individuals. That's not an easy change to make for myself. And that's something that I think has been the theme for me to improve upon this year.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I think you're just getting started and there's a lot more exciting things out there. Now you have to seek approvals and own up that. That's going to be the tougher transition. You have the Irregular Design Manager newsletter. You have a very interesting newsletter and you talk about the missing manual on how to use career ladders. Can you take us through some first-hand experiences on how you've empowered people?
Yeah. So the reason I started the newsletter also has an interesting story. Before that, I used to share these links on either randomly on Twitter or like with specific friend groups. There was a request from those folks, can you just send it all together? Sometimes people ask me topics. And then I realized that, okay, maybe I should explore this newsletter thing wherein like what I'm reading, I'll be able to, consolidate it into an issue and share it with people. And it's quite irregular because like, the frequency of publication depends on whether I'm getting time to read, right? Or if I'm getting time to find interesting stuff. So as you see, I'm kind of on a hiatus because it's been a very busy couple of months here. I hope that changes soon. So when it comes to job ladders, it's still a fairly new topic as well. We've seen some great work from certain companies out there. I think for me, Intercom's job ladder is definitely something that I feel is great. GitLab out there with their manual is great in explaining what is the roles and expectations of every level. But I think we're still on the journey of trying to figure out what works best. Even at Jiva, we're currently in the process of finalizing one for the team. So this would help give some structure to our hiring and evaluation, as well as like the growth of an individual. The thing in our industry, people use titles, and sometimes you assume that a senior designer here would be the same designer at another company, but that's not true because what we do is defined by these ladders, and how much thought goes into these ladders help define whether these type of two designers may be the same. They may not be, and it should be fine as long as you're able to evaluate them when you're hiring them. Right. So the second thing is that these give that structure and guidance to an individual on how they can grow within the org and what the org values. It's better to put it down rather than just assume something is expected of them. And this is something that most people don't do. They don't ask their manager what is expected of them. At the very last moment when they get like evaluated for their performance, they wouldn't have any way to justify their performance because they never had that discussion. Sometimes they may also feel that they're not going too good, and like it's best to have this conversation and understand where they sit in terms of the expectations. I'm just like not talking about what is the most difficult aspect of all of this. It's about figuring out what those variables are that is important to you as a design team, as a designer in that team. Different people have like different ways of going about it. At Gojek, I think we did like scope, complexities, and abilities. At Jiva now we're doing like core functionalities and functional competencies. We've been trying to do that instead to see if we can, so that since we have different disciplines, we try to keep a common section and then specialize. Each specialty will have its own defined rules and values that it needs to have. This is, of course, a very tricky space to be in because you mentioned if someone is hiring for a role and they are not an expert of that particular discipline, it becomes hard for them to evaluate, right? Having this rough definition of what they value in a particular designer could help them find the best individual for that particular role. And that's what it's great that today there are like organizations out there who are open sourcing their framework so that you can go refer it and see how that matches with what you have, and you can get started much faster than starting on your own.
Right. Absolutely. I think for me, the keyword was actually going and really talking to your team to really understand what do they want, because every title, every hierarchy will be very bespoke to the company, the leadership, their culture. And that's why you can't just assume that this is what a junior designer wants, a senior product manager wants. And you know, prioritize that as actual work. You have to make it a part of your core responsibilities. And that's how actually you end up getting a great design culture in your team or a general work culture. Very important insights. We'll actually link all those references you gave. If whoever's listening want to check it out, you'll find it below. I think, Kenneth, now it's time for us to go to the last two questions, a little bit less serious. It's part of some of our rituals. One thing I wanted to ask you is, if you were a superhero, which one would you be?
Yeah, so at this point of time, I don't actually follow superheroes actively, but when I was like a crazy fan, I used to like the concept of Green Lantern. I probably associated closely with it because Green Lanterns were able to create the constructs using just willpower. There was this phase when Blue Lantern could do it with hope. So that was, I think, an interesting concept among all the superheroes. I would say Green Lantern still.
That's a great answer. I'm going to steal it anytime somebody asks me as a designer. I think Green Lantern's a good answer to give. And this is a ritual question. We end our podcast with this, which is, how do you fail at design? Something which we call design oops.
So it's, I think, easy to fail at design, right? It's very rare to actually succeed at design. If it was easy to do good design, then we wouldn't be living like this. It really is about the people that you work with. That makes the difference to do better at design. It's not easy to fail at design if you have a good group of people to work with, who you can empathize with or talk with, and you have the freedom to open yourself to. That's how you prevent design oops. But the most common way I've seen people fail at design is like not understanding who they're building for. There is a tendency that not everyone in the team understands who they're building for. And it becomes usually like a fight of designers trying to explain to everyone else that, hey, this is what we should be building. And the other folks are talking in their own different languages, either business metrics or time metrics. And it becomes very hard for all these people speaking different languages to understand each other. That's a good recipe for failing at design.
Correct.
And I'm not saying that designers need to own this. It's actually something that the whole team should be owning, trying
Correct.
to figure out who they're working for and why, what everyone else is speaking. That's why I talked about the people first. If you
Right.
get a group of people, there's high chance that they are going to take the effort to understand the other person and try to explain it to them in their own languages.
Got it. Yeah, I think what you mentioned is a very common design oops. Happens with young founders all the time. Kenneth, thanks a lot for spending so much time with us. It was fantastic chatting with you, Kenneth. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, I did. This was fun.
Very, very insightful nuggets of information, Kenneth. All managers or people who are wanting to be managers definitely learned quite a few things today. And that marks the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Watch out for the next one, folks. Everybody listening to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whoops.